Big move abroad, taking time away from the business, figuring things out. The team and I did work to make sure that things would work seamlessly while I was in transition. And yet, oh boy, did I notice a number of gaps in our systems and our processes that were still very much dependent on whether or not Nadia showed up in order to work well. Our move highlighted many gaps that still needed to be addressed when it came to founder dependency in the business. I'm Dr. Nadia Brown, founder of the Doyen Agency and host of the Sales Culture Unfiltered podcast. And in this episode, this is part two, where I share my journey as we moved abroad from the United States to Mauritius and the many lessons learned as it related to founder dependency in my business and how things could continue to move forward when I was not available. Tune in. Welcome to Sales Culture Unfiltered, the podcast where we get real about what actually makes or breaks high-performing sales teams. I'm your host, Dr. Nadia Y. Brown, a sales culture and communication architect, and I work with sales leaders to engineer high-impact teams that hit their numbers without burning out or breaking down. On this show, we dive into unfiltered conversations with sales leaders, industry experts, and high-performing teams about what it really takes to drive revenue, retain talent, and build a winning sales culture. If you're tired of surface-level advice and want the strategies, challenges, and hard-won wins that actually matter, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Sales Culture Unfiltered. So, in the previous episode, I talked about our move from the US to Mauritius, beautiful island in the Indian Ocean. And there were a number of decisions that needed to take place in getting here. And it also highlighted some massive gaps in the business. So today I'm going to talk about more about the journey, but also about some of the gaps that were highlighted once we made the decision that we were going to move. And so one is, I think back to just us making the decision to move and actually executing it. So I feel like my husband and I had this conversation, and we were in conversation and we were making some decisions. So we initially, when we were thinking about this probably about a year ago, in earnest for real, we were looking at South Africa as a potential. And that was kind of like that had worked its way up to the top. And I'll have to do a completely different episode around like how we came up with country, right? And so as we were beginning to kind of understand what the immigration process would look like, we eventually determined that that probably wasn't going to be our next move, um, based upon a lot of just the process itself, and then also the timing. Like it was just going to take a lot longer to do all the things that needed to be done than what we were willing to invest in. And so we wanted to make this happen sooner. And looking back, so I recently had a conversation about our move, and one of the questions you get asked is, what would you have done differently, and would you have hired support? And the answer for me was an emphatic yes, because I feel like we had this conversation early enough in the year versus when we actually moved. And because we made a decision that this particular country wasn't going to fit, we kind of hit pause on a lot of things. And so in the back of my head, there was that question of, are we actually going to do this? Are we going to make this move? And fast forward towards the end of the year, and we're like, yes, let's do it. And now we have, I don't know, maybe a good 60 days from when we were like, yes, all in, to when we actually were in a car headed across country. Um, there were just a lot of things that needed to happen. And so now, as a founder, as a business owner, and I'm not just managing this move, but I'm also managing the fact that there are still things that need to be in place so that the business can function without me because I am anticipating the fact that I won't be available and in the business in the same way, at least for several days or weeks, right? And so we're preparing for this. And there were a lot of things that I feel like we did well. And then moving and just being in it, I also got to see the cracks for real in the different dependencies or areas that I overlooked. And so when I think back to what that could have looked like, and yes, I get to help clients in this, but sometimes you can't, and this is a phrase I actually saw from one of a really good colleague and friend in one of her recent newsletters is that you can't see the picture when you're in the frame, right? And then that was where I'm in the frame, and there are just certain things I could not see until I got out. So me moving and being removing myself from the day to day actually allowed me to not be in it anymore. So things that we did well were just anticipating what are the projects that we have on deck right now and how are we moving them forward and where can we pull Nadia out. We did that very well and really helping to prepare for me not to be in place. One of those projects I think I mentioned in the first episode was we were launching a new podcast. So getting episode record interviews recorded, getting those recordings in a queue so that the team had everything that they needed to move forward. And also just developing and making sure to review the process so that they weren't dependent upon me to make any decisions. So I feel like one of the dependencies that we did well was really empowering the team to make decisions without Nadia. It was like, what would Nadia do? And they were able to move forward. And also, I would also say another dependency that we were able to cover well was problem solving. Because as I mentioned before, my team, when things came up or they anticipated, they got into the place where they also were able to start anticipating what challenges might arise with Nadia being in transit, right? With travel. Anyone that has ever traveled knows that yes, you may have flights scheduled, and yes, this is where you're supposed to leave and where you're supposed to be at these times, and that doesn't always work out. So, what if there are delays? What if there are cancellations? What if all these things happen? The team was prepared and just being able to, okay, come up with an alternative, make certain decisions, solve certain problems without me having to weigh in. I don't even know if I know yet all the problems or things that came up while I was, making that transition. So not only was it the travel part of it, but it was just us getting boots on the ground, getting settled, all those things, dealing with jet lag. Like the team was doing whatever they needed to do, and the business was moving forward and outward facing. No one even knew that things were taking place behind the scenes because they had it. Some of the cracks, though, that I began to see, some I anticipated, but others I didn't. One was in relationships. So, a lot of my relationships I own, right? Like, I am that person that meets the people and has the conversations, and people really resonate with me. But they don't always know the rest of the team per se, especially those developing relationships. Is one thing if that person is already a client and now they've met the team and I can say, well, for this period of time, reach out to this person, or right, like managing that piece. But those developing relationships, because again, the business still has to operate and you're looking at from a sales perspective, that was a piece where I was able to really see that gap more clearly once we moved because that part of it still rested with me. And with me now being distracted and managing other pieces of my life, that part got put on hold because no one else had the ability to manage it. And because Nadia, even though I am a tech girl through and through, I promise you I am, I have a degree in computer engineering. I love technology. I'm not afraid to use it. And there are certain aspects of my personality and how I'm wired that I am definitely very much a paper and pen notebook kind of girl. So there are literal things that my team could probably benefit from that were in my backpack, literally. And that's a huge gap. It's one that I'm aware of, and I just haven't figured out the best way for us to address it because I also need to honor how I operate, but I also need to honor what my team needs to get. So that was one of those gaps that definitely stood out, and that the relationships were on pause until Nadia was in a space to be able to re-engage to continue moving those along. And in some cases, that also meant sales. So revenue was impacted because the team was not in a place, the system was not in place to manage and continue certain relationships to move them to a point of even making a sales decision because I was the bottleneck. So that was definitely one where I did have some level of awareness around, but we had not done the work necessary to address it before we left. And I think that is one of those things that, again, had we had more time or leverage the time differently, because we had the time, I just didn't leverage it in that way. I didn't really think about leveraging in that way in preparation because it was then that one thing of that big question mark of when we were going to move. And then when we made the decision, it was like this really compressed timeline, which in some ways worked, but in other ways I feel like that was one of those areas where we definitely as a team needed more time, especially to do the knowledge transfer. And I made the joke for many years around if we could just take a USB and stick it in my ear and, be able to, or not even my ear, sometimes it's my client's ear, like we just be able to just download all this information and then we can run with it. But that's not how it works. Like you have to pause as the founder and share this information, whether it's recording videos or screen captures or all the things, but it requires you to make a pause and make a conscious effort to get those pieces in place. And that's one of the gaps that often happens, even for people like me. So that was definitely one of those gaps where I was like, ooh, we could definitely improve in this area. I think then the other one that definitely was a big highlight or just shone a big bright light on was the dependencies to Nadia's time and how we were serving our clients. So that was one of those things where honestly, I believe I was a lot naive in. I knew it was a potential issue, but when we started looking at moving to this part of the globe, and the majority of our relationships are US or Canadian based, right? So it's definitely in that hemisphere of the world. We're a completely different hemisphere. And I believe that there was a part of me that there's a part of me that knew that yes, this is probably not going to, not probably, this isn't going to look the same. Like it's not possible. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, we'll figure it out. Like it won't be a big deal. We'll figure it out. We'll make the necessary adjustments and it'll be fine. So this part, that dependency around my time when it came to client delivery, definitely, I don't think I really spent the time addressing it in a way before we left the US because part of me just dismissed it as it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And we did, but it didn't have to be as painful because it took me getting here, us getting settled, us doing all the things as a family, and then realizing, oh, this isn't going to work in the same way. And we are going to have to address it probably sooner than later. So, for example, the time difference. So, we are 11 hours ahead of Arizona, which is where we lived prior. Thankfully, neither of us, so in Mauritius and in Arizona, we don't do daylight savings. So, that stays the same. We are 11 hours ahead, different at all times throughout the year. That's not necessarily the case for other parts of the country or the world for that matter. So, um, when you do the math, by the time the US wakes up, like this is just a literal, we are preparing for bed or we're in more of that down. Like right now, at the time of this recording, we are now 8 hours ahead of East Coast in the US. And so our 4 p.m. is the East Coast 8 a.m. And we have literally completed our entire day by the time our daughter has gone to school, she has come home, she has probably completed homework. We're looking at now dinner, like we're in that whole decline. I won't say decline, but we're in that winding down part of our day versus the rest of the world. I should say the rest of the world. That part of the world is in their wake up and get started part of the day. And it really was one of those, oh, wait a second. So I was like, oh, I could just do meetings here and there, but this is now disrupting family time, which is part of the reason why we moved. Like that was one of those values. And so it became a non-negotiable really quickly, certain times. So yes, there are certain times that are fine. My husband is very involved parent, so that's not the part like I need to be pulled out, but there are certain times around bedtime and bedtime stories. Like there are things that our routines that we had in the States that we continue here because that is part of our family and that's just what we do. And our daughter is a big part of, like it's important. And she also has a voice. So when she started voicing to me, like, hold up, you missed one too many bedtime stories or, bedtime routines for this to be okay. I had to take a step back and be like, okay, let me reevaluate. The other was I realized that I don't like working past a certain time of night. I just don't like it. It doesn't feel natural. It's not fun. I'm not at my best. And the quality of the work is just not there. And so I was just like, ooh, we're gonna have to address this. And so some things required um just completely, there were things that were kind of on the fence that we just as a team decided that, you know what, at least some things I think is forever, but it was just like we're just not doing this. So there were some clients we just offboarded. But that ties back to revenue because, yeah, they're offboarded and that frees up that time. But it also offboarded means what does that mean for revenue in terms of how are we going to replace it? We have a strategy and a plan, but we hadn't necessarily prepared for that in that way. But when it came to my family, it was just a non-negotiable. It was like, this is the decision that we're going to make, and we're going to have to really address like how we move forward. So then it required us to really look at what are more things that the team can start taking on. Um, how do we serve in a way that is still high quality, high touch for those things that we want to be high touch? And they are a lot more efficient without requiring my time. And what do you need from me, me, and the team as a founder that we can now equip the team to be able to do that when I'm not available to do that. And so now real time, you're seeing our team, that's basically where we are with certain things. It's like, what does this now look like? Especially that relationship piece, Nadia. I know that this is how you function, but that is no longer going to serve us in the long run. And it's also, this has probably been the fun part. It's been like, okay, we knew this day was coming. I've been talking about it literally for years. Now we're in it, which is fun. I won't lie. And it's also like, how do we still serve our clients? And so now there are two things that are happening simultaneously. One, we're looking at clients, especially in the US, and where can we leverage async? So it doesn't require this all the time, face to face. It's asynchronous. So Voxer, let me review something and send a Loom video, right? And vice versa. So how do you leverage that technology and still provide that level of support, that level of insight? Because one of the things that I love to do and I get to do is really to help clients connect the dots and to be strategic, that strategic voice and really breaking things down and moving things forward. But does my strategic voice need to be live all the time with via Zoom, or are there ways that we can leverage it via Voxer and other ways? Or does it have to be my voice at all? And we just equip the team who is in the US, who is on that in those time zones, and they just leverage it and they run with it. They have such brilliance and expertise too. So it was, where does it need to be Nadia, at least for now? And then where can the team start to step in and pick up more of those pieces and move the ball forward? And so we're just really in that space right now of managing that. And I'm having those conversations with my daughter and my husband around, okay, you guys, we made this move because we wanted to be able to have a slower pace of life and to create those memories together as a family and have those shared experiences and not always have me locked in the office and life is happening outside of the office, or we're putting things off because I just didn't have the bandwidth or the time to do it, or my husband didn't have the time off, or they had a big project at work. Like those were some of the driving forces, reasons why we made this decision to move. And so I was very conscious, and I've been very conscious in this transition of not replicating and recreating the schedule and the life and the way I showed up in my work the same, and definitely taking into account what that looks like. And my family is very vocal. They're like, excuse you. And quickly being able to, okay, well, that means we need to make the adjustment. So it's been one of those things where I have been very aware of, we did some things very well as a team, and I'm really excited. I will say, moving and coming here, and having a project like the podcast launch, which is also very public, right? Like it's not a secret we're launching this podcast. And have it go so smoothly felt so good as a founder, and just wait, to have that experience of it was fine. Was it perfect? No. Was it fine? Yes. And noticing those areas where things may have happened, communication. I remember there was an email that one of my team members sent out to a guest. And I read the email because she CC'd me on it. And I was like, that's nice, but I don't think I would have said it like this. I wouldn't have said it like that, or I would have added this, or what about this? And there was that temptation to jump in and fix it or address it. And I was like, you know what? It was good enough. And if I want to create a different standard, I can definitely do that. I can address it later. But I had to fight that temptation to jump in and fix it now, because ultimately it was fine and my attention was needed elsewhere. And I think that as you are going through that process of decreasing or even eliminating founder dependency in different areas in the business, you have to get to that point of, one, giving your team the space and the grace to figure certain things out. It also, once they're in it, it highlights those areas where you're like, oh, wait, I do want to maybe adjust this or refine this or create a different standard or process around this, which you can, but ultimately you're like, you know what? But for today, that will do. That will do. It will be fine. And learn to shift your focus to those things that you need to focus on to move things forward or continue to keep the business running in those areas that truly only you can do. And I want to share that this ultimately is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. At the time of this recording, we are just shy of about 90 days of us being here in Mauritius. And so there are still a lot of things that are new. There are still a lot of things that are in transition. There are things that, from a life standpoint, are kind of settling down. Our daughter's in school. We have a place to live. The immigration process is, we're good. We have our permits, right? Like that part, those parts are winding down. But now it's like, okay, now that we are aware as a team, and especially me as a founder, that these gaps exist, what are we going to do about it? And am I going to default into former patterns when I was in the US? Or am I going to honor the vision that we set as a family when we decided to make this move? Because the temptation is to just default into old patterns and behaviors and act the same way, and you ultimately recreate what you had before. But we as a family decided that that was not what we wanted to do, which requires me to show up differently. And thankfully, I have an amazing team who's also on board, and I've given them the permission. I tell them, look, this is the vision, and taking into account with my family, and we have decided there, when we make decisions, when we're planning as a team, I need you guys sometimes to remind me of this, because I'm likely to forget. Like it's a new muscle that I'm also having to exercise. And so in today's episode, I just wanted to share, like, yes, this was an exciting move. It's been exciting. It's been an adventure. There have been definitely times of overwhelm, frustration. I don't think we've had any tears yet. I don't think we've had any tears other than we did lose my husband's grandmother. So those were tears, but those were different tears. So I think that, but it also has just been eye-opening in some of the best ways, because when you look at building a business and you look at really taking that big vision and amplifying it, but when you look at saying, I want something different. I want a different life. I want a different childhood experience for my daughter. I want a different relationship with my spouse. I want my days of work to look different. I still want to make an impact and I still like what I do, but I want it to look different in this execution. It requires you to make different choices and to show up differently and to be honest about the things that, okay, that worked very well. And here are a whole list of things that could have worked better. So stay tuned as we continue to talk about this transition journey. And next episode, we'll just talk more about how you move forward as a founder. You said you wanted different. Now you're in the middle of it. What does that look like? And it doesn't require a move abroad to start to say, you know what? I want my business to look different. And I don't want everything to be solely dependent on me all the time, because it may not be a move abroad that is the catalyst to start to highlight some of those gaps. It could be something else that is the catalyst. It could be an illness, whether it's yourself or someone you love that requires you to step away. It could be a happy time, a marriage or something. I don't know. There's so many things and factors of life. Life will life. So when life is lifing and it's impacting your business, those are the times that you start to see those dependencies. But you don't want to be in the middle of something, especially not a crisis, and then have those things show up. You want to start to prepare, and you want to start to prepare now. And no, not all of it is directly tied to revenue, but it is tied to revenue, because when you're not able to do certain things, or the team isn't able to do certain things to continue the revenue moving forward, that becomes a problem, and it becomes a problem fast. And we want to make sure that we are resilient when it comes to revenue, no matter what's happening in our lives, no matter what's happening in the marketplace. How does this business continue to move forward? And one of the first things is it can't always depend on us to make all the decisions, to manage all of the relationships, to do all of the things. There is a level of support that's required, and we have to make the commitment to doing the sometimes difficult work of figuring that out and putting the systems, the processes, sometimes people in place to keep things moving forward. So stay tuned for part 3. That's a wrap on today's episode of Sales Culture Unfiltered. But the conversation doesn't end here. If something sparked your interest today, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit our website at thedoyenagency.com to explore how we're helping sales teams build cultures that last. And if you found this episode valuable, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow sales leader. See you next time.